Your budget's bigger. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm State Representative Dan Christensen, the House Minority Leader. And today I've got with me Representative David Hayes from the 10th Legislative District. And we look forward to your questions. We got a lot to talk about today. We had hearings on education, both the House and Senate education bills and appropriations last night. And there's a lot of other fun things that are on the docket for this week. And so I look forward to your questions. Senator Schessler.
Well, thank you, Leader Christensen. With me today is the newest senator, Shelley Short, who is also no stranger to the press corps and successful leadership from her time in the House. The Senate is functioning at the way it always functions, 2 weeks from cutoff, moving ahead on a host of policies, and we enjoy your questions to come.
Can you, Senator Schessler, can you talk a bit about what, if anything, is expected on the floor, if not this week, in the coming weeks?
Glad you asked that. We have rules scheduled a little bit later this morning. We hope to be able to, we're going to do one round of rules with the new Lieutenant Governor, build a floor calendar, and hopefully get on the floor this week and keep a few bills moving.
Do you think Real ID will be coming up for a floor vote soon?
I don't know if we're quite ready. We haven't had a full caucus on that yet. I think when we pull it from rules, then we have to caucus, and Senator Hobbs, who co-sponsored and voted for the legislation, is going to have to talk to his caucus, see what their level of support is. If there's measures to perfect it, we'll take a look then.
Can you give us an idea of what might be in the rules pool?
I haven't decided what I'm going to pull yet, Jim. I think there's largely bills, that aren't super controversial, and we're going to go in, every member's going to pull one bill from white to the floor, that we have a calendar that is ready to go, and get ready to do a little more work.
There's some bills that dropped Senate Bill 5308 in the Senate and 1956 in the House that would prevent the state from sharing religious affiliation data with the federal government, aimed to stop a national Muslim registry. Are those things priorities to you guys?
I don't think it's a high priority because I haven't yet read the bill or caucused on it.
Is that something that you think the state needs to do?
Well, like I said, I'm not familiar with it. I think we're going to focus on jobs, education, and budget issues. I think we'll leave some of those other things to somebody else.
In the House?
Same thing. I mean, there's, with 147 legislators down here, everybody's got great ideas on what's important to them or to a certain group of constituents, and we've not talked about it even as a leadership team at this point of the game. You've got hundreds of bills that are out there that, as we all know, at the end of the day, you might see 15 to 20% of them are actually going to pass. And so whether these things have the horsepower to move their way up the food chain and be considered by a large enough percentage of the body to vote for, even in committee, at this stage of the game, I'd say is probably doubtful. Who else?
When it comes to the Senate GOP education plan, I remember a couple weeks ago, I think it was Senator Schessler, you said you have concerns about lifting that 1% property tax cap that's been in place, but your education plan also would not apply that 1% property tax cap to the new property tax you institute statewide. And how do you reconcile those viewpoints?
Well, if I recall properly, that we protect the junior taxing districts that under their 1%. We give 40 or 42 out of 49 districts property tax relief, in some cases very, very significant. So we're working our way through it. Senator Rossi has pointed out that we want to use growth in revenue over the future to bring that down to where we cover every district.
But you don't seem as if you support at this time lifting or adjusting that cap for local governments, but you acknowledge, or at least your plan does, that for the state, it's not really an option to apply the 1% cap to that.
There's not a lot of interest in raising the cap right now within our caucus. The local government one, I gotta say, there's not a lot of support.
Well, and Senator, if I might weigh in on that too. We had meetings with our county commissioners and that subject came up this past year, and one of the frustrations I expressed is you're wanting to lift that 1% count, but you're not wanting to deal with what it takes, actually reforming the costs of what it takes to do, state agency programs and all of that. And that at some point here, we'll know that the counties have excess revenue, that they will continue to pass those mandates, and the counties really won't be in any better shape. And so I think for that reason, there's a lot more thought that needs to go into the county proposal.
Right, and if I might have a word on that as well. One thing that we do down here in the state legislature quite well is pass our bidding back down to the junior taxing districts, the counties, the cities, and where you talk about a fire district or a school district. We pass many, many unfunded mandates every single year. And frankly, we need to get away from that. We keep pushing these expenses down to our local governments, having them do our biddings, and we need to stop that. The unfunded mandates need to stop.
I get that, but how can you tell counties, well, we can't apply that cap to our own tax because it's not sustainable, but then you still need to abide by it?
I think the Supreme Court ruling is pushing us harder than we otherwise might want to be pushed. If this was simple property tax reform, it would have happened under one of the past 4 Democrat governors, but it didn't. So now the court has us in a box that limits our options more than we'd like.
There's gonna be a hearing tomorrow on turning Washington into a right-to-work state. I think in Congress flavor in
Sports, yeah.
Does the Senate Republican caucus generally support that?
I think there are members within our caucus that do, and there's members within our caucus that don't. We're having a hearing on the bill. We'll see what the hearing leads to.
There are bills in both the House and Senate that would keep the would require insurers operating in the state to maintain free preventive care, no copay, regardless of what happens in DC with the Affordable Care Act. How do you all feel about efforts to maintain some elements of ACA? It would lead the insurance commissioner to create a rule that would require preventive service care to still be a no co-share.
Well, I think our caucus can agree if it's a good public policy, the insurance commissioner should put it in bill form and not do it by rule.
Well, so that's this bill.
Yeah, well, I think we want less healthcare by regulation and more by legislation.
Do you think preventive services should be an element of healthcare that's maintained?
They already are in our
Yeah,
state.
exactly.
I mean, it's already there. If, Uniform Medical, for example, even on our HSAs, we cover preventative care, screenings.
And let's not forget also that several years ago, when the Affordable Health Care Act was put into place, there were legislators down here that were trying to get in front of that, and they were trying to codify some of the ruling that was going on before ACA even came into place. And so this is, before and after ACA, there's been efforts by various legislators who like certain aspects of what's going on at the state level. They want to try and codify it, or the insurance commissioner does. Of course, we all know that our insurance commissioner was one of those on the tip of the spear when it came to support for ACA. And while there's some good things that have come out of it, there's also been some terrible things that have come out of it. And so I think that any time that we're trying to put in place something to get in front of what's going to happen at a national level, we take the risk of putting a lot of effort into something that could get rolled on us. It could be, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. We may be surprised. We may be incensed, but we don't know yet what's going to happen at the federal level. And so it does concern me that we're trying to get in front of something that we don't even know. It has not yet been defined by the Fed.
Before the session started, I believe it was Senator Braun told me that Republicans were very much looking at funding the school rule for lead and other toxins and things like that in schools, trying to keep lead out of school water. He said he didn't know exactly if he could fund it right away, but that it was something he was looking at really hard. Can you just give a brief update on where your caucuses are on that? Is that something that you think for sure will be in a budget of yours?
Well,
the school rule, or anything further or anything less? I mean, would it be just specifically lead and water, whole school rule?
some is capital budget, some is operating budget, and some cases, local school districts should take some responsibility too. We have small school repair grants. We have, we're gonna have a robust school construction budget. We'll be looking at this in a variety of hosts, but, you know, some responsibility bears on local elected school directors.
And there's a bill in the House, and sorry, I can't remember the number, but it's on the, I think it may have even been heard yesterday. But it's this week was gonna be heard related to lead in our city water system. And so, you know, we're trying to vet this out, not just for the schools, because you've got a lot of problems within various municipalities as well. As we saw just in the last 12 months, there's been, and 24 months for that matter, there's been some problems with lead showing up, not just in our schools, but in some of our municipalities. And it's a problem. It is absolutely a concern of ours. You know, there was old technology based on the type of pipes, lead line pipes that was used years ago that's caused some of this. There's been less than what I would call good practices put into place as far as maintaining and updating some of those systems over the years. The other thing too is we built new schools, but we have not necessarily, when building those new schools, we've not necessarily replaced the infrastructure lines that are feeding those schools. So I might have a brand new LEED Gold standard building in place, and I've got 1930s water pipes that are feeding it. And so those are some of the things that we need to take a look at, because in those cases, those water mains are feeding the entire neighborhood, not just the school.
And one of the bills,
I was gonna say, is that Representative Farrell's bill?
It may be. I'm sorry, I can't remember the
Well,
number. I
in
saw
that
it on the intro
particular
sheet,
case,
yeah.
it would be like replacing eventually any pipes that had, you know, that were lead pipes at all.
Right.
Or, you know, goosenecks, things like that, and she wanted some money for that in the budget. But there's also the possibility that other people could end up, you know, footing the bill for that. Do you think that the state should be responsible for funding all of replacement of lead pipes, all of it?
No, not necessarily. You know, the state was not responsible for putting those pipes in the first place. I mean, we have, you know, whether it was through the, you know, what was that old fund we used to have years ago that was providing infrastructure to our municipalities? Public Works Trust Fund dollars. But it was the municipalities were taking out zero or low interest loans, and they were having infrastructure. They were the ones doing the contracts. They were the ones that were responsible to make sure that they were providing the infrastructure for their communities. And so if we're gonna say that this should all fall on the shoulders of the state, I would disagree. But somebody else.
University of Washington is asking for more money for more med students in Spokane. They want 20 more. Is there support in the Senate Republican caucus for that and among House Republicans?
Go ahead.
Well, in the Senate, we love both of our medical schools in Spokane.
Do you love them enough to add more students to them?
I hope we're successful in it, Jim. I think we committed to getting WSU's medical school off and running, and the chancellor and the dean have pointed out they have had fantastic quality applicants apply, so they're getting exactly the cream they wanted. We recognize the WSU Gonzaga private university, public university part. Gonzaga and UW, yeah. Sorry about that, Jim. But there's keen interest in the Senate. We love both of our universities.
Well, we made a huge investment, you know, related to this whole project in Eastern Washington. And at the end of the day, for me, it's going to come down to, as much as hey, we want to support this stuff, these decisions will be made, you know, as we get into the final budgetary process. It would be my intent, yes, I'd love to see it take place. That's why we made the investment in the first place. But at the end of the day, we got to look at where the dollars are at. We have not yet come to a McCleary decision. We've not yet come to terms with a lot of things down here. Our cutoff is the 17th, I think, here. First policy cutoff is. And so we're going to see which ones kind of rise to the top. Now, that being said, there's also going to be a number of bills that won't get through cutoff that will be deemed necessary to implement the budget. This could very well be one of those issues.
Make it sound a little bit though like you don't have any control in that process.
I'm in the minority,
The bill's
you
gonna
know,
write
so
itself.
I've never had control in the process.
Maybe then I should direct that comment to your counterpart.
No, don't misunderstand me in this, is that there's a lot of things, you know, the budgetary process is a great process. You know, people will complain about it, but name me a system that's better, or that's, you know, I mean, when you have as many legislators as we have down here with all the various priorities that represent all four corners of the state of Washington that come in with what their big issues are, and they throw out their wish list for us all to vet, we have to go through the process, and we have to start weighing first of all, what's the amount of money we've got? What are those priorities that we know we must fund based on the constitutional principles that we all swore to uphold. And then you see how much money is left over, and then you reprioritize what's left on the list. And if maybe we can't get 20, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 19. I don't know the answer to that at this stage of the game. But that's part of the budgetary process, no different than what we all go through in our own personal budgets. There's a lot of things we'd all like to do in our personal budgets that we just don't have the money to do. And so, yeah. But it's absolutely a priority. Otherwise, we wouldn't have supported building the facility in the first place. We wouldn't have put all the other resources that we've done into it in the past.
Yeah, I'm just struck by the fact that with both this question and the question about potentially sharing information with the administration in DC, Joe's question at the start of the conference, no expression of your interest as leaders, where you think it falls with caucus. It just sort of like, well, it may happen if, God willing, the creek don't rise. But you guys have a real role in this stuff. You have a lot of influence. What's your take on those two things, personally, as leaders?
Well, for myself, I think that, let's back up. What has history shown around this place? It has not shown that we have gone and sat in our chairs and watched the place go by. It's shown that we've been willing to put in the extra hours, the extra time, build budgets that have been overwhelmingly some of the highest meaning confirmed budgets we've had in decades around here. That wasn't because we didn't know what we wanted. It's because we didn't show, when we're looking at all the different proposals that are coming before us, all the different wants and asks and needs that come before us, if we get too early out there in saying, yeah, we're gonna do every one of these, and then the budget doesn't work, the Senate ran and passed a bill to make sure that we get our revenue forecast in a month earlier. Why? So that we can make earlier smart decisions. I'm a small business guy. There's a lot of things I'd like to do that, sometimes you just, I can give my support for it. But at the end of the day, you gotta have 76 votes out of this building to pass anything. You gotta have a majority in both the House and the Senate and the governor's signature on it. And so we will, at the end of the day, we'll be part of the process, absolutely. We've got our internal priorities, but so do the Democrats. And you got 147 free agents down here that are all gonna hammer out what their individual priorities. And our job as leaders is not necessarily to move what we personally want. As leaders, we have to set aside what I call the luxury of tunnel vision on your own issues. And you gotta kinda acquiesce to the rest of your caucus. And as a caucus, you have to decide as a team, what's really gonna be the priority as a team.
Speaking of higher ed, Senator Baumgartner has a bill that has a hearing today that would require Senate confirmation of appoint presidents of the state's four-year public colleges. Is there any support up there amongst you guys on that?
It's an interesting idea. I didn't even know he dropped it, so thanks for letting me know.
Alone signature on it, so
Yeah.
I don't see anyone else on it, but.
I don't know, like I said, first it's been mentioned, I haven't even really thought about it.
Do you think the Senate or the legislature should have more say in presidential appointments to the universities? I mean,
I really haven't, thought that much about it. I have thought many times that we should go to a model that you cannot serve until you are confirmed, but we haven't gone there yet. So if we haven't done it for cabinet officials, might be a while before we come to that term on presidents.
Senator Schuster?
Speaking of that, are there going to be confirmation votes on other agency heads this year?
Absolutely.
Do you know who and when?
I hope to have Roger Miller on the floor very quickly. Our relationship with the administration, we had a really good back and forth process between all four corners in choosing Roger Miller. And we had very positive testimony, and I hope to make him one of the very first people we confirm this year.
Is there going to be more of an effort to make sure that there's not a backlog like there has been in the past on that?
We're looking at getting that process going, prioritizing, Rachel, people that really should be confirmed. And we do have the work of the Senate, to take care of first.
This is among the work of the Senate.
Yeah, and we'll be moving ahead on it. There's always a whole new crop of confirmation. Some even haven't even had a hearing yet. For example, in higher education, Senator Wilson, as soon as she gets through cutoff, she'll be looking at lots and lots of confirmation hearings. The other chairmen, I think, are focusing on getting bills out before that February 17th as well.
So doesn't that suggest that there would be a problem with a rule that said you can't serve until you're confirmed? Because confirmation hearings tend to go to the back behind policy bills as cutoff is coming in, and then they
Well,
get slipped into the
Yeah,
Senate
they've
calendar.
taken that because they can serve in perpetuity without being confirmed. For example, former Speaker King was never confirmed as a WSU regent in 8 years, even with his own party running the Senate. So clearly, it's not a huge priority if they're going to serve anyway. Whereas, and I think Joe King is a great example, that his own party wouldn't confirm him.
Senator Baumgartner has a ban-the-box bill out. If he can come to agreement with Saldana and others who are currently disagreeing with him over the preemption part of it, is that something that has a chance of moving out of the Senate?
You know, one thing about the Senate, you get some really interesting alliances, and maybe they will, maybe they can't. But I think it's an interesting pair to work on a project together. You have the newest downtown Seattle progressive and a Spokane conservative, and that's what's fun about the Senate.
Senator Schessler and Representative Christensen, the Attorney General has been pursuing this case against the Trump administration on the travel ban. He's doing it on behalf of the state of Washington, which means the taxpayers' money is being spent to move this case. You support the use of taxpayer dollars in that lawsuit?
You know, I hadn't even thought of that aspect of it yet, Jerry, that the Attorney General certainly wasn't consulting us when he acted. And, you know, we don't focus a whole lot on the other Washington. We're focused on those issues that are critical to the 140,000 or so people we each represent.
But part of the suit is that it was disadvantaging the state and the state's institutions like UW and WSU. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that it is or isn't. I've been totally focused on getting that education bill out, keeping our committees functioning, and leave the other Washington to somebody else.
Well, look, we've got a lot of lawyers in the middle of this. We've got court system involved with this. You've got courts around the country involved with this, you know. And look, I've got constituents that have contacted me on both sides of this issue. Upset, thrilled. At the end of the day, we're not the Attorney General. Yes, the Attorney General is using state resources to do this, and the Attorney General will have to be held accountable to whatever decisions that he makes. He is a statewide elected official. He was voted into this position, and he's going to have to be judged by the citizens of the state of Washington at the end of the day, like it or not. You know, I have, while myself and I'm sure everybody sitting in this room has a personal opinion about this thing, we as leaders of our caucuses are focused in on the legislature, that we were hired by the public to do this job. And, you know, if indeed there's an overwhelming outcry that there's something that we have to do with respect to this in the future, which I doubt, then we'll deal with it at that point. At this stage of the game, we've got the 17th of February coming up. I've got a lot of bills we're trying to get taken care of. We got budget decisions taking place. We've got a lot of things, hundreds of bills on the docket. I've got regular meetings with the speaker and the governor. I've met with both of them just yesterday. Those meetings are taking place. I've met with Senator Schessler and his team this morning. So I'm meeting with the different caucus leaders. We're trying to get the priorities of what we as legislators were hired to do moving forward, so that we're not slowing down in the business of this place or getting waylaid by other distractions that frankly other people are responsible for. Boy, that must have been a great answer, because you're already it's quiet.
You don't usually talk that fast, we're still learning.
Oh, okay. I'll give you my transcript.
There's still
Not
some
you,
things
yeah.
yeah, but it's not urgent. It just seems like there's still a lot of disagreement on whether the GOP education plan cuts funding for some districts. I believe some districts came and said that they would lose money under the Senate Republican plan for education funding. Senator Schessler, I mean, why is there that difference of opinion on whether this would actually cut funding for some districts? And Democrats certainly say it would.
Because I think Senator Fain summed it up very well with Olympia cuts. If you don't get as much as you asked for, it's a cut, even though it's more than you were currently getting, is very, very common. And perfecting this for 295 school districts, is really complex. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how do we help not just some of a few really large districts, but some pretty tiny non-high school districts out in our part of the world. But getting to 295 is very, very difficult. This is a system that has had Band-Aids applied to it for 30 years. And now we're trying to truly fix it. At the end of the day, I can explain our system, and it's relatively new that we proposed. How do you explain ghost dollars for funding education? Ghost dollars. I mean, that is when you realize our system really needs an overhaul, when ghost dollars are a serious factor for school superintendents.
Well, and if I may comment too, yesterday we had, last evening we had a hearing in the House on both the Senate proposal that passed out of the Senate, but also the Democrat proposal that's being considered. Let me be really clear, there's a stark difference between the two. Like them or not, just on the, if you read the bills, one is a policy-only bill. The House Democrat policy it's only a policy bill. And it's going to be passed out of appropriations on Thursday, is what their goal is. And I'm saying to myself, okay, this is the Appropriations Committee. What happened to the K-12 committee? The K-12 committee is supposed to be passing out policy bills. This is going to be that's all it is. It's a policy bill, and it's going to be passed out of appropriations with no money attached to it, no plan, nothing. There's not going to be any fiscal anything that's going to be voted on to implement that plan. Contrary to that is that then you have the Senate plan that was being considered, which I'm sure they won't vote on. If they do, hurrah for them. But it actually does have the money attached to it. There's huge differences to this, and let's be very clear that once we start getting in negotiations of plans between the Senate proposal and the House proposal, or the different majority proposals, it would be unfair to even use a policy-only plan to even be considered as part of negotiations when there's no money, no votes, not enough votes to back it up. In other words, put together a full plan that's fully implemented, fully funded, so that then we can start negotiating. Because right now we've only got one, and I'm sincere about this. It's just I don't want to use pretend we're going to fund this plan as a negotiation piece when you don't. If you're really going to support this, then you better have the votes not just to support the policy, but you better also have the votes to support the resources, and that right now is in question.
But absent a budget proposal from Senate Republicans, we also don't know how, I know Senator Braun has said that the expectation is that the backfill of $1.4 billion can be done within existing revenues.
Right.
Well, all we can do is take his word for that, because we haven't seen how you've actually allocated that. So is it fair to?
I think it's absolutely fair, because we're also, as part of the funding source for the Democrat plan, they're actually considering taxes that the voters even voted against. Bottled water, remember that one? I mean, there's been, when you start regurgitating some of these same old funding sources that has been turned down, or let's be real honest with it, have never passed this side of the building. They've never passed, and we're going to continue to say that's how we're going to fund something that they've never proven they had the votes to even pass once.
I think
That's something you have to take into consideration here, because if we're going to solve this problem, it means that you have to have that rule of 76, the majority votes in the House, the Senate, and the governor's signature to get it through.
You know, I'd like to add something here. The court was very specific on having us do levy reform. And I think to answer your question on whether school districts, lose or not, that's part of this discussion process. I think for me as a legislator, I'm starting to work with my schools to understand, what if any implications there are as a result of this. But this was a good first step of putting out a plan that was thoughtful and really thought through some of the issues that we have continually heard from our schools, from teachers, from superintendents, from our communities, right? So I think it's incumbent upon us as legislators to look and see where there are needs. And that's, again, part of the amendatory process as we go through. If there are unintended consequences of the draft that has been put out, then we need to continue to work on that. But one of the things I'd like to add is I think there was a misuse of, kind of that levy cliff in terms of getting from point A to implementation, where I think that some of our school districts are unsure of what that impact might be. And so we're going to be working with our schools to make sure that this works for them. It's a starting point.
I'm gonna follow up on one thing though. Furthermore, the Democrat plan, the way it sits right now, does nothing to address our regressive levy system. It doesn't solve that problem. That's why we're here in the first place. That's why since the late sixties we've been here. And if you look at that plan, there's nothing in there that solves that. So what does that mean? It means that, okay, your plan says we're gonna throw billions of dollars more into this, but you haven't solved the root of the problem. You haven't changed what got us here in the first place. Please remember that when you're looking at these plans too, is you've got to, at some point, you've got to decide, what's the root of this problem in the first place? And are you gonna be willing, are you gonna have what it takes to solve that? And that's, if there's one thing I will say, whether I like all the details or not, frankly, to what the Senate put out, because I think every plan out there's got its little holes in it, and we're just not there yet, is that at least they address that aspect of it, which is a root cause of why we got here in the first place.
So if I'm sort of wrap two into one in staying as fashion.
He's not here to defend himself.
Channeling.
So regarding your cut, you said, you posited sort of a binary here in the sense that you've got, well, either our plan does it correctly or we've got some people complaining about Olympia cuts, but it sounds like there are currently programmed funding increases set to be implemented by 2018, which compared to which the plan does represent a cut. And there's also the question of 1351, which wouldn't take effect till 2020 and has $4.7 billion attached to it, which schools will no longer see. So that's not an Olympia cut. Those are promised in statute funding increases that won't happen under the plan. That's question one. And then
Can I answer the first question first? I don't have a long memory. Okay. Sure. In regards to 1351, I think we've agreed that the real value is in K through 3. And it's not a great value when you get past there. So let's finally repeal that portion of it. As far as the funding,
I mean, you've agreed that it's in that, but the voters.
well, the voters didn't give us a means to pay for it. I mean, in all honesty, if it was paid for, that would be nice, but it isn't. Capital or operating, it isn't paid for. Some of these cuts really are Olympia cuts, and getting it right for 295 school districts, it took us 30 years of mucking around with this to get it down to something that we can all basically understand, which means ghost dollars don't fit a modern school budget. So we're trying. I mean, I heard from Onion Creek in Senator Short's district that, you know, it's got a little improvement to go. We've heard from others. We're going to improve this as we go, and I'm optimistic it will get better and better, and we'll get there.
My second question was just regarding districts like Onion Creek and Southgrays River, Goldendale, Starbuck, mostly Eastern Washington districts. Some of them would see, more than $1,000 decrease per student. What's the plan for ameliorating that deficit in the current plan?
The first run was the small school formula. But when you get down to what they used to call remote and necessary,
Like
Starbuck is
Don't
kind of
forget
remote.
Skycomish.
Yeah, so we have the Stehekin School District in Senator Hawkins's district. You got to ride a boat to get there. So we're going to have to work at getting it right for some of those, whether they're small, non-high school, just plain remote, or somebody large. But the good news is it's a formula that we can understand. We're going to fund, I think it's 5 basic areas we agree should be. We're going to a per pupil model, and we will get away from a long laundry list of programs that were complicated and didn't achieve their ultimate goals.
Thank you.
Thank you.